if I can't fix them personally, I know the people who can help me fix
Mm.
them or at least come up with alternatives to make someone happy or to fix a major
Yeah.
problem with a website or an app. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with that. I think in order to be a good PM, you have to just embrace that chaos.
Yeah, I think that's a great segue into the next principle. You talk about being a multilingual communicator. You talk about if I can't fix the problem, I have the resources to be able to do it. And in order to have those resources, you have to speak a lot of different languages. You have to be able to speak to finance, legal, the IT, the marketing department, whoever else. I think that's super important to be able to not just focus on what's in front of you, the project, but how it's all coming together, how all those outside forces are affecting your delivery, affecting what you're working on. And I think that, that happens when I'm doing a project at home, let alone a project at work. There's all these outside forces that are going to impact it. And I need to be able to speak to those things.
Yeah, you have to be able to decipher what people mean, whether it's with the language that they use or there's some kind of motivation behind what they're talking about. Like having a minimal perspective on how different types of roles or people would communicate is so valuable because you end up having to be the translator between groups. So I guess the example that I usually go back to as it relates to work is when I'm talking to a client about development, there are things that I need to know. Like I said earlier, I'm not a development guy, but I also know enough about code to make me dangerous. Like I could get into a site and start altering code and
Sure.
break it. I'm not the one who's going to be building it ever. It's just not my strong suit. But I know enough about it to speak intelligently about it. But I also know enough that I know when to bring the right people in. So it's about, linking up concepts and speaking languages that make sense to different people, like I said, in different roles, but also in different types of organizations. One of the things that I love about project management at an agency is you get to work with clients from all walks of life and different types of organizations and hierarchies. And I love digging into that and understanding what makes them tick so that I can better facilitate conversations and decisions for projects.
Being able to manage people that don't necessarily report to you. One of the things you say in the principles, we're lovable hardasses, which I love. And you talk about how we have to work hard to build relationships with our team. We also have to have their best interests at mind, but we need to know when it's time to stay quiet, but when it's also time to speak up.
Yeah, it's a tough position to be in. And I think it's probably one of the biggest challenges that I hear from PMs is, I have to manage a team and I have to make them accountable for their work, but I don't manage them. So if there's a problem, I can't necessarily do anything about it. So it's important to have that perspective to know what you can and can't do. It's also important to be the person who is not nervous or scared to speak up when things are wrong and tell people when they're wrong and have those difficult conversations and just be unfazed by the chaos,
Continuing on your list of principles, being a good learner, being attracted to learning, I think any project manager is a consummate learner. You have to be. You have to get excited about learning about new things, about new technologies, new approaches, new frameworks, new ideas. And following people on Twitter and LinkedIn, listening to podcasts like these can help you start to really round out all the things that you're doing on a day-to-day basis. And so for me, that transitions nicely into talking a little bit about the workshops that you've done in the past and now the Digital Project Management Summit. If somebody was listening right now that hadn't been to the Digital Project Management Summit, what are some of the things that you truly believe that they would take away from that experience?
So first of all, it's 2 days of presentations, so keynote presentations on a stage, as well as breakout sessions, so more kind of workshop-like sessions. So what I really try to do when programming is trying to get presentations and workshops that will provide actionable takeaways. So things that I can change in the way that I'm working, or I can bring back to my company and have a conversation about the way we work as a team immediately. And I think people really love that. Even bigger for me, at least, is the sense of community. I think this event really started to form the digital project management community. We're going into our 5th year in a couple of weeks with our next event. And we see a lot of repeat attendees who really have made strong connections with people in the community. I've seen meetups pop up all over the country and actually globally. And those people are coming to the event as well. So it's kind of become a meeting and networking place as well. And that's one thing that I really love about it.
I've experienced it, and I think it's a super valuable thing to attend if you're a digital project manager. Not just the takeaways that you get from it, but the network you build, I think is super important because you do take away a lot of things, but like you said, it's 2 days packed full of content. A lot of that can be forgotten as soon as you dive back into the projects and the work that you're doing. But having that connection to the community after the fact, I think is really where it gets sticky. And I've seen a lot of people express a lot of value in being a part of that.
Yeah, I think the other part that's really cool is that it's not just about sitting there and listening to someone speak. We provide a lot of opportunities for people to kind of gather in groups and talk about really specific topics and challenges and outcomes and tactics. So it's about sharing and learning from everyone. It's not just about listening to a speaker and what they have to say. Mm-hmm. And I think that makes for a unique experience.
Yeah, it's great. And I can't recommend it enough. And so I want to switch gears just a bit to what you're currently doing in your terms of your consulting. I'd love to hear some aspects of what you do when you're doing those consulting gigs with either agency project management groups or with people that are doing product development or even in the enterprise. What's some typical things that you see that are some of the first things that you like to address when joining a team for the first time in consulting?
The first thing that I notice is, what does project management mean to the organization? And a lot of times I'm being hired because that vision hasn't really been solidified. It might be in the heads of some people. You might have PMs working on projects, but they don't necessarily understand what the company or the leadership of the company wants and needs them to do. So I really like to get in there, understand how project management can best help them and their projects, and then define a vision for it. And that usually plays out nicely when, especially when companies are building a team and really just trying to understand the value of PM and what it can do for them aside from creating a plan and checking tasks off a list. It can become far more strategic. Mm-hmm. I think a part of that too is I often find that PMs are working in a disparate fashion. So one person might be using one tool and running status meetings a certain way while another is doing it another way and another is doing it another way. So, there's no common standard for how things should be done. So I really try to work with teams to align the project management team on a set of practices, typically building out something that I would call a framework of, how you should work, rather than these are the specific tools that we use. We get into that level and we get into a detailed level of how to use those tools and how to format. But my goal usually is to use that vision to create a more solid team that is rallying around a certain set of practices. So, my thought is that if you're working with an agency, and even if you're working in a corporate internal team with project management, you shouldn't have a different experience from team to team or project manager to project manager. It should be consistent the whole way through. So those are a couple of things. I've noticed tools. So there's a lot of conversation around tools, and I have to say it's not ever my favorite conversation. It's like I would rather focus on the things that you should be doing outside of the tools that will make your projects great. The tools are a necessary evil, and there are definitely some things that you need to do to select the right tool to make sure that everyone's using it in a consistent way. And I do that. But to me, that's not the meat of the experience and what's right. Then it comes down to just coaching and training. I love coaching one-on-one calls with PMs to talk through current challenges, talk through goals, and just help to sort of set them on the right track or the right path for their project work, for their careers, that kind of stuff. And a lot comes up in those conversations that I think eventually I could probably write some kind of, so, hey, you're a new PM. These are the things that you're going to face. That might be the next idea for my next book. But it's part of the job that I really do love because, again, it's about building a relationship and understanding someone's motivations and fears and problems and helping them sort of sort it all out. So yeah, it's that kind of encapsulates some of the stuff that I'm doing with companies. It varies from company to company.
Sure.
I've worked with really large organizations with teams of, 30 plus PMs. I've worked with agencies with no PMs and figuring out what does project management mean to you? How can your current staff absorb some, practical project management processes and tools without really overloading them and letting them focus on, technology and design.
The project management role can be put in a lot of different places. It can be put in different departments. I've seen organizations where they have separate PMs in separate departments. And to your point, they end up working in a very disparate sort of approach. They have their own tools and approaches, and they do cross paths, and it's like oil and water sometimes when they get together. And then I've also seen where you've had a very strong team that's really focused best practices in project management and working together as a team. But I think that also can create some adversity with the rest of the organization in times, because it gets to be a us against them sort of atmosphere. And I know you've done quite a bit of career coaching over the years. If there was a project manager listening that was interested in either stepping up their game or maybe moving into an agency sort of setting, if you were to give them some tips on what is the best way to present themselves, either in the written word, because again, we're project managers, we don't necessarily have a nice portfolio like a UX designer would, or a bevy of sites, things that we've coded as a developer. What are some ways that we can represent ourselves in a way that really shines on our best aspects?
The first thing is to always be yourself. I think so many people, and I've seen this with a lot of PMs, they're really focused on what professional means to them. And sometimes it turns out to be in written word and in spoken word, really dry and boring, right? I think it's important to be yourself and not to be scared to show your personality at work, because you want to show the people the true person that they're going to be working with. And that will sell them if you're yourself and you're just honest and transparent. I think the way that translates into written communications is really important too. I think obviously I've said this probably 5 times in this interview already, but it's about clear, concise, solid communication skills. Mm-hmm. And if you're not able to compose an email that is equal parts informative and friendly and concise at the same time, then you're going to have a hard time with written communication.
Yeah.
So that's something that I would really focus on early on.
If I'm a project manager and I'm running projects and I want to improve, and maybe PMP and Scrum certification, those types of things are not in my immediate future, what are some tips that you might give to that person to hold up the mirror, if you will, and start looking at how they're processing information and working towards their best professional outcome?
To me, the way that I've always done that is to approach people and ask if I'm doing a good job, if I'm being helpful to them. And to me, that's kind of the best way to get feedback. It might make some people uncomfortable to do that. But again, you kind of have to shed that discomfort, that layer that we kind of, or wall that we kind of build around ourselves, and just think, I'm going to work in my box and I'm going to do the things that I know I'm supposed to do. But part of the job here that we're talking about really is about relating to people and people relating to you. And if you're not working in a way that is flexible and adaptable and helpful to them, you're not necessarily doing a good job. So sometimes the best thing you can do is just ask for feedback.
Yeah, I remember coaching a project manager once who talked about that their boss was always talking to them about their performance, and they were confused by it because they weren't getting that message from their team or the clients. And I said, that's actually a red flag, because if you're not getting that feedback directly from the team and only from your manager, that probably means the team is going to your manager and not to you. And so I think that's a really good and important tip, is to be directly confronting. And I don't say confronting in a negative way, directly and purposefully talking to people on your team about what you could be doing better, how you could be doing it. Are they getting everything they need? Are they not? I would do that with the clients as well. Midway through a project, even if the project's going good or bad or whatever, I would always take time to reach out to ask if there's something I could be doing more to let them know. Because just like when people go out to dinner, there's a lot